Welcome to Recross the Paths, where we celebrate the Cube community one conversation at a time. My name is Cade. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by Ben Weitz, game designer at Wizards of the Coast, and we're here to talk some Cube. Thanks for being here, Ben.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm kind of bouncing in my seat a little bit. It's not often that I get to talk to staff from Wizards of the Coast, and especially folks that have, their hands on the project that we get to enjoy so much through something like Cube. So this is really exciting for me, and particularly with your Monored Cube that we're going to get to dive into. I think there's a lot to explore together.
Yeah, my terminal illness is that I love talking about Magic. Even though I work on it all the time. I'm actually here after a full day of working at the card factory, but I really love the game a lot, and I've been cubing for like a long, long time. I got into vintage cube like right around when it started becoming popular.
So good.
I was an early adopter, I would say, and I love it so much, so I'm super excited to talk about how cubing has evolved over time.
Well, first I want to say I think that's a good sign if you can do a full day of magicking and then come out and still be excited to talk about it. And yeah, I'm grateful that you're willing to give us the time to do that. And you mentioned kind of jumping in, an early adopter of Cube, as it were. So let's start there. How did you get into Magic, and why Cube?
I got into Magic originally because I just thought the cards looked cool. My brother was playing like a bunch of different TCGs from the early 90s. I remember he had like a werewolf one. I think it was called Rage or something like that. But yeah, I liked collecting gold cards because the border was like a gold color and it looked cool. And I just enjoyed getting those. And then eventually when I got a little older, my brother actually taught me how to play. And he's long since stopped playing, but it's sort of stuck with me for my entire life and has sort of been a fixture of it. And now I work on the cards. I've been working at Wizards for about 5 years.
So you jumped in early on in the game. When did something like Cube intersect that for you?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly when. I was still playing FNMs at like my local game store in Minnesota. It was like a garage, basically. It was called the Monsters Den. I remember trading for cards for it when I was still going there, so I must have been in high school or something like that. But I feel like the concept had just started. It was like the first time I heard of the concept, and people were like writing articles about it on the mothership, so like the official Wizards sites at the time. Mm-hmm. And it was all vintage cube because that was like the first thing that people made. It was like, oh, look at all these cool cards from like the whole history of Magic. Put them all together and have like a bespoke limited environment where you get to play all the most powerful cards in Magic's history. And at that time, all the most powerful cards in Magic's history included like Arc Slogger, a 5-mana 4/5 that you could pay a mana and exile the top 10 cards of your library to shock something.
Yeah, I remember being baffled by Arc Slogger as a young player, and even as a current player. It has its moments.
It was a very strong card in Standard at the time, and Magic was still young enough that we had cards like that, and I had cards like that in my vintage cube. So that was when I first started, and I eventually stopped keeping my vintage cube up to date, but I got a lot more excited about building cubes as cubing like evolved towards more customized limited experiences. So it's not just everyone has a vintage cube anymore. Now it's like, oh, everyone is building their own kind of personal environment to have fun in.
Does that freedom kind of overlap with some of what you get to do at Wizards by way of game design? Like, does some of that sensibility overlap, I should say?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of what I do at Wizards is working on limited environments for the sets that come out. And that is very similar, where it's like you're creating a play experience for people. They open, randomized booster packs, and they get cards, and they draft, and they build decks, and that's how Cube works as well. It's just that, like, what cards you use to build your deck are going to be very different in the different cubes versus, like, booster sets or whatever. But a lot of the work that I do at work is very similar to creating a cube environment.
Have you found it pretty comfortable to separate those in your mind, or does it kind of feel like there's a bleed there?
There's definitely a bleed. My cubes are like my personal projects, and the work limited environments that I do are, their work. But I am more attached to some limited environments at work than others. the way it works is that different game designers are the leads of different parts of a set, and people on the play design team are the limited leads for various sets, and the sets that I am the limited lead for, I feel a very strong attachment to.
Yeah.
And I feel almost like they're not quite a personal project because it's obviously shared amongst all of the people who are working on it at work. So it's not just mine or anything, but I still feel a very strong sense of like ownership and affinity for those environments. So the last set that I worked on that I was the lead for that has come out was Tarkir Dragonstorm.
Awesome. Yeah. So then kind of in that same spirit, something that you have carried along the way and that you've helped guide before you release it, you get to do some of the same things with the Cube project, just over probably a much longer time period.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about the Cube is that it never ends. It's always, I'm always updating, I'm always tinkering, whereas the Magic sets that we make, we gotta put our pencils down and we have to ship them at some point.
A strange mercy that there's no deadline for Cube. You can keep working on that one.
Well, it's fun,
Absolutely. Yeah, you could probably continue to find things that you would update with any limited set you're working on, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we could spend a literal infinite amount of time on a single set. Like, it's much more of a diminishing returns situation where it's like, eventually we're just like, okay, we have to be done now. This is the deadline, so...
Pencils down.
It's going out the door. We made it as good as we possibly could make it. But certainly there are still things that could be improved. Nothing is perfect.
One of the things you do with Wizards of the Coast is that you are the representative for the color red on the Council of Colors. Can you speak a little bit to what that looks like and what that entails?
That is actually no longer true. I am now the representative for white. But I was the representative for red for like 2.5 years or something like that.
So is that a promotion or a demotion? No, I'm just kidding.
We've started rotating. Okay, don't tell anyone, but I think it was a demotion.
Don't worry, I won't tell anyone, Ben.
We've started rotating, so different counselors will swap with other counselors so that we all get more exposure to each color, which is probably good overall, but I do miss red sometimes.
So what does that role entail? Is that like you are an advocate for that color in design, or you get to kind of speak to what that color can't do, or should or shouldn't do, maybe?
So the Council of Colors is the group of people at Wizards of the Coast who are sort of in charge of the color pie and trying to make sure that all of the cards are adhering to the color pie, and also when there are certain design problems, trying to find more like color pie solutions, like more design space for those colors or various things like that. Being a particular color on the color council is more of like a distribution of work type situation where it would be too much work for one person to like monitor every card or whatever. So I'm in charge of looking at the white cards when we do file passes of sets. Other people are in charge of the other colors, and that just means that we pay special attention to those colors, but everyone on the color council has input over every card. So it's not like I'm the king of white or anything like that. Everyone gets to talk about all of the colors. It's just that I'm sort of in charge of making sure that we look at the white cards that are the sketchiest and we make sure that they're all color pie appropriate.
And I know you suggested that you have an affinity for red cards from over time. Is that something that you feel like you develop a deeper understanding of the color being in that role? Or is it like you have that role because of a deep understanding of a color like that?
I think it's a little of both. I mean, red has been my favorite color in Magic for a while. Working on the Color Pie Council has made me more aware of design troubles with the color red. So for like example, red is the color that cares the most about the life total of people. It's just, one of the more aggressive and burn heavy colors. And so some formats like Commander have different life totals than Standard. And so it has been challenging sometimes to find cards that can help. Like red has been one of the weaker colors in Commander for like kind of a long time because all of your opponents have twice as there's 120 life instead of 20 life, and like one of red's main strengths is dealing damage to people. So figuring out ways to open up design space to help make red cards that are more appealing in those formats, because like we can't just increase the numbers on them all, like that That would just break standard or break cube or whatever.
Yeah, you can't just make lightning bolt 6 damage. You have to have
Right.
that much damage, though.
Even if we could, it wouldn't even be as good as lightning bolt because you have 3 opponents instead of 1 opponent.
That's true,
so,
right?
So stuff like that is the kind of problems that the Color Pie Council solves. Another example is for a while, designers were having trouble finding keywords to put on blue creatures. All of blue's keywords were aggressive and none of them were defensive, even though the color itself is a very defensive color. So limited environments and constructed and standard were struggling. So at some point this was 3 or 4 years ago, someone pitched adding vigilance to blue. Previously vigilance was not part of blue's slice of the color pie, but that was such a good idea and it solved for so many design problems that blue had that now there's blue vigilance creatures in every single set.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like it fits in line with the sense of blue being able to tap and untap things, that maybe you could functionally recreate that idea. Or maybe we're just making Sarah Sphinx in Color Pie now.
I mean, Sarah Sphinx is totally Color Pie now. That's the Color Pie changes over time. That's how it works. And things that were in Future Sight once seemed crazy are now just reality.
Less crazy by the day, certainly. Well, I'm excited with some of your background and expertise in this area to explore your Monored Cube. Though I want to add one piece of context here as we jump in, too. You're also an experienced tournament player over time. You have some Pro Tour victories under your belt, I believe, some really strong showings at big tournaments. How does that experience impact your game design?
Yeah, I never won a Pro Tour, but I have top 8'd one of them. I won a Grand Prix.
Okay. I flipped my PTGP.
Yeah, I won a Grand Prix with a mono red deck, for the record.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, it matters a lot for my job. I'm on the play design team, which is the team that's responsible for balance and power level. So being a competitive player has been important for that background. It just means that I have a much deeper understanding of what cards are likely to be strong and about how much mana we should be charging for each effect and stuff like that. Being a competitive Magic player and being a good Magic designer are 2 different things. They have different skill sets. Those skill sets overlap, but they are not completely the same. So it is definitely different because a game designer is kind of optimizing for fun and a competitive player is optimizing for winning. And those are 2 very different things. But being aware of both of those, I think, is often important in game design because a big aspect of game design is the players are going to do what wins because winning is fun. And so you need to make sure to make what wins be fun. We want to make the fun cards strong and the strong cards fun. And that is an approach that I also bring to Cube. When I think about my Monored Cube, I really think about, okay, what are the kinds of cards that are just strong most of the time? And are those the cards that I want to be strong? How do I tinker with the power level of the Monored Cube in order to get the experience that I want?
Yeah, these are, in hearing you express, these are great questions for any designer to be thinking about. So that's really good. Well, let's give a proper overview for the Monored Cube here, Ben.
Yeah, it is obviously a cube comprised of only red cards. Red cards and colorless cards. Right now it's 420. It's 420 cards. I like it when cubes do not deterministically contain the whole cube in a draft. I like it when they contain most of a cube so that you have a good idea of what sort of synergies are possible, but you can't just go in with a deterministic plan. So that's why it's a little bit larger than 360. It is, to some extent, just trying to show off all the different things that you can do even if you only have red cards. It's very easy for people to assume that, it's a mono-red cube, that means it's all about aggression, it's all about mono-red aggro, because mono-red aggro is the most successful red deck that has existed in Magic, and so it's the one that exists in people's minds. But actually, it's been very important to me that the Monored Cube have all sorts of different decks for all different kinds of players who want to experience different things. I actually started it as a thought experiment. I was I wonder if I could actually pack enough different stuff into a cube for me to want to build it. Because I was not going to build it if all it was going to be aggro all the time. I just don't think that that's a very fun or an interesting... It's not very replayable. It's going to get very boring very quickly.
How long ago did you start that ideation process? Like just thinking of like that
Yeah.
context shifts for what's available for red over the years.
I'm trying to remember if it was like 2.5 or 3.5 years ago.
Okay, so within recent history, so I imagine you found pretty quickly a spread, a variety worth pursuing.
Yeah, yeah. When I was like running through the archetypes in my notepad, I was like, okay, I could write down 10, and some of them are kind of similar to each other, but they're different enough that 10 felt good to me.
Well, kind of a broad thought as we look at the project here. What do you think makes red such an appealing option for a monocolor design?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've actually thought a lot about this, and like I've thought a lot about other monocolor cubes, but I think red, in my opinion, is actually the best color for a monocolor cube because red cards are actually quite strong against red cards. They're quite like a lot of red's power is in like cheap creatures that are aggressive, but also a lot of red's power is in like cheap burn spells that can kill the cheap creatures. So there's a natural cat and mouse there, and also it means that you can put in red cards that are specifically like red is the color where toughness matters the most. You know, black cards tend to not care about the power and toughness of creatures, right? Like Doomblade will kill any size creature. I mean, Doomblade's a bad example for a monocolor cube, but Fell, Fell will kill any creature regardless of size. And I'm a pretty firm believer that Magic is more fun when the power and toughness on the creatures matters a lot. So I really like that in the Mono-Red Cube, like a 5/5 for 5. 5 is just kind of a big number. And it's kind of strong because just by virtue of the fact that it's hard to kill.
Yeah, like you said, if you have a black removal spell, it's going to engage with that so differently than looking at a hand of red cards going, oh boy, I've got to math out to get to that number.
Yeah, I think that's like really important to the experience of like being a really fun game. I think that really improves things. Those are the main reasons that I think red is like one of the more fun colors. I just think there can be a lot of catch up. And also the games can come down to some pretty high tension moments where, you know, you're just hoping they don't top deck a burn spell, and if you can manage that, then you'll win. And they have like a 1 or 2 turn window to top deck a burn spell, and that can just be a really fun high tension moment. And I guess the other thing is that colorless cards tend to cover the weaknesses of red pretty well. Like one of the weaknesses of red is that there's no life gain, and then another weakness is that you can't kill big creatures. But there are a lot of colorless cards that gain life, and there are a lot of colorless cards that are like inefficient. They're very expensive, so they don't outcompete the like cheap burn spells or anything. But if you need to kill a big creature, there are some inefficient colorless ways to do it.
Yeah, it's like your Spine of Ishsaz, your Meteor Golem types, like these sorts of things that
exactly.
they'll get the job done in a pinch.
The other color that I've thought about building a cube for that I think is the second most fun color to build a monocolor cube for would be blue.
Interesting.
The blue cards are going to be strong against blue cards in a very similar way to the red cards. Like, blue is a very spellsy color, and there's a lot of cool stack stuff you can do, but Spell Pierce is, like, pretty good against blue cards in a way that I think would be pretty similar.
That's a little surprising, only because it feels like blue is often criticized, perhaps, for not having specific targeted removal or being able to engage with the creature once it's on the board particularly well. That it all kind of becomes tempo and bounce. Like, I know there are things to be done, but
yeah, I kind of think of that as a similar weakness to like red not having life gain, where it's like there are some colorless cards that can help you cover for that, and there's a lot of blue interaction like bounce that can help you buy time. So like blue can still interact with the board pretty well, but I mean, hard removal, not so much, but there's a lot of stuff that you can do just by virtue of bouncing and countering threats and stuff like that.
oh, that's totally fair. Well, I don't want to get us lost in the weeds on blue, because we're here to talk about red,
fair.
of course. Of course. Well, with red, I think probably worth jumping on the, one of those core things. What do you do with something like burn in a cube like this?
Yeah, I mean, well, I embrace it. First of all, I think it would betray the mono-red experience if there wasn't a lot of burn or there wasn't an explicit burn deck. Yeah, it's something I pay attention to and manage quite closely because, like I said, just having access to those cheap burn spells, they function, as removal just as well as they function as face burn. But having access to those is like really critical to the fundamental experience of the cube, and I want every drafter to always have access to a lot of cheap burn spells if they need them. And so the things that I pay attention to is sort of okay, how do I include different burn spells? Like, I don't want them all to feel the same. There's some amount of similarity that's inevitable, right? Like, there's so many 2 mana, 3 damage burn spells that, like, do something slightly different that I want to figure out, okay, what synergies can I hook into those slightly different output of those spells? Which ones can I include that'll work in the, like, synergy archetypes that I'm trying to prescribe? Or maybe some of them are just kind of, like, generically useful, like this one Exiles or whatever, which is the thing that it's doing in the cube. But I try to make sure that each of the burn spells, I know I have to include a lot of burn spells, and I want to make sure that each of them is doing something slightly unique or slightly different than all the other ones as best I can. And then managing also how many of them can be pointed at players versus how many of them can only be pointed at creatures is another thing that I pay close attention to. And have just slowly, like, iterated to a spot where I'm pretty happy. Like, every so often I think to myself, I should add one more burn spell to the cube because it felt like people didn't quite have access to stuff they needed. Or I'll be like, some games were taking a little too long. Maybe I should add a face burn spell or something like that. But mostly I've just arrived here after a few years of just iterating and adding a few and taking out a few as time goes on.
I will say I do love that. Just throw another log on the fire here. You know, we're just gonna add a little bit, subtract a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a fundamental building block of the cube. It's maybe like the most fundamental building block of the cube, and so there's not a great way to science it. I feel like it's more just well, I mean, maybe this is sciencing it. There's not a great way to just like predict it in advance and like map out the perfect thing. It's more of just like okay, I have to just keep changing things until it feels correct.
Well, I imagine this is something that you also get to experience pretty actively in your game design officially, right? Like where you're iterating so frequently that you get to just test things and see if it feels correct and then change it if it doesn't.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, game design, at least the way we build Magic sets, is there's a ton of just iterative feedback loop and just do a draft, make some changes, do a draft, make some changes, do a draft, make some changes. And that is, I definitely bring that to cube design because that's part of what I find fun. Like, I just enjoy doing that.
Yeah, like you get to draft, you get to play games. What's not to enjoy?
Yeah. I get to feel like I'm making it better every time, you know? That's like important to me.
That continual improvement for sure. Thinking of something like Burn, have you considered breaking Singleton for this project at all?
Oh, I'm a much hardliner for Singleton than most people, I think. Because it's really important to me that the experience feel different if you do it multiple times. I want it to be replayable. This is something I want to be able to do with the same group of people 100 times or whatever. So I actually, not only do I not break Singleton, but I don't even break functional Singleton. Like, I only have Pyretic Ritual in my cube. There is no Desperate Ritual. Despite wanting to put in more red rituals, I like there are not very many of them, and Storm is an archetype, so... But I have, like, kind of a hard line about that. So, you know, no Searing Spears, no Desperate Rituals.
Is that kind of like a philosophy thing of just, like, you wanting to showcase the variety, maybe?
Yeah, it's a philosophy thing. Other people don't follow that. Like, sometimes they even have, like, 2 of the same actual Magic card in their cube, and I think it's just a personal choice. It's about, like, what kind of experience you're trying to provide. And I am sympathetic, especially for, like, functional reasons, where it's just like, oh, I think this archetype is really fun, but I can't, like, it doesn't work unless I put in multiples of this card, and, like, that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't really think that the Monored Cube is that far, because there's just a ton of red cards available. So
turns out
there's my list of, like, would-be includes and heartbreaking cuts is, like, very long. So I just don't feel the need to break Singleton. I think there's a lot of options, and the archetypes all work very well in the Monored Cube, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate that you mentioned archetypes here. You mentioned kind of writing down themes as part of the ideation process. Do you think of the Monored Cube as having archetypes or lanes for players to look for?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I built it under the assumption, I, like, sketched out 10 archetypes that I wanted there to be, and I tried to include enough cards for each archetype, and, you know, as we did playtests, certain archetypes were not working, or certain archetypes were working more than they needed to, and so I would take cards away and put other cards. And over time, it's gotten a little bit fuzzy. Like, certain archetypes that I started with, like, aren't really archetypes anymore, and there have been, like, enough cards printed that I could, like, make a brand new archetype. So, like there's, like, a discard aggro deck with, like, Inti and Hollow One and Marauding Mako, which like uses a lot of recent cards, so it wouldn't really have been possible 5 years ago, but now it is, and like now there's just enough cards in the cube that it's basically an archetype, so it'd be hard to say it's not an archetype. But when I started, I had a much stronger structure in place, but now it's fuzzed a lot more over time as I've just sort of found what's fun and worked on and like enhanced those things and accentuated that sort of stuff. But like, you know, there's a bunch of goblins in the cube and there's a bunch of Goblins Matters cards. So it's hard to say, like, goblins is just clearly an archetype. And there's a bunch of dragons in the cube.
Those feel in some ways like as ubiquitous as burn. You know, if you ask what is red known for, what are some things that red does well? It's like if you don't say goblins or if you don't say dragons.
I definitely wanted to make sure to include the like core red experience archetypes, but there's also some like weirder stuff. There's like Artifact Reanimator with like Goblin Welder and Trash for Treasure. And there's Storm, which I guess nowadays is a modern deck, so it's like kind of common, but back then like mono red Storm was pretty unusual. Like, you would expect most Storm decks to have blue in them. Or there's, like, a big red control package where, you know, you're just trying to play, like, mid-range threats and, like, Chandra, Planeswalkers, and stuff. So, yeah, they're definitely archetypes, and it's important to me that they feel different.
And have you found in your playtests that those do feel different, that players find their way into those decks, as it were?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Actually, like, the most common thing people say to me after their first Monored Cube draft is, that was a lot more fun than I expected. Which
high praise,
you know, I take as a compliment. I get that the description can turn a lot of people off, but I think there really is something for everyone, and I think it's really fun. And people just do completely different and crazy things. I made fun of my friend recently for getting decked in Monored Cube because I was just like, that should not be possible. Like, someone should lose. Someone should lose the game before this happens. There's not enough card draw or life gain for you to deck.
That's amazing. So Ben, how do you think about power level in a cube like this that's spanning kind of the history of the color?
Yeah, I think cube designers should be very intentional with their power level of their cubes. Some of the least fun I've had is when the power level is like really wide and it's just like some cards are completely busted and other cards are just like borderline unplayable. So in my opinion, cube designers should be very intentional about where they're aiming the power level of their cube. I personally enjoy formats that are a little lower power level than like full-on vintage cube, which is why the power level of my Monored Cube caps out at about, you know, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Ragavan, Fire Blast. Like, these are some of the strongest cards in the cube. Ancient Tomb, I guess. Although my friend insists that Radiant Fountain is stronger than Ancient Tomb. It's very funny.
It does have a unique line of text here, huh?
Yeah. But yeah, I try to aim specifically at like between Legacy and Modern Cube power level. If it's only one color, obviously it'll be a lower power level than full 5-color cubes, because the 100th strongest red card makes it into my cube, but not the 51st strongest blue card. I also think it's very important to be cognizant of structurally what kinds of cards are going to be strong in your cube, and then make sure to include like the strongest possible versions of the other cards. So like there was a time period where I had Filigree Familiar in my cube instead of Circuit Mender because I was worried Circuit Mender would be too powerful. But eventually I was just like, well, the burn spells are all the strongest cards anyway. I should just put in the card that's really strong against burn spells, and so I added Circuit Mender instead of Filigree Familiar. And I was very happy with that.
Yeah, that's a great example. I'd love for you to speak more about how do you practically do something like that as a designer, to like set a power level or to set a target that you're aiming for in an environment like that?
I don't know, it's kind of an art and not really a science. I mean, this is where I really use my competitive player background, but there are a bunch of cards that I've refused to add to my cube despite being like popular cube red cards because I just think they're too strong. And they're like too strong in ways that are like expected or boring, I guess. Like Broadside Bombardiers is one of these cards where I just don't want to put that card in my cube because I just think it does too much damage.
It does a lot of damage.
Yeah, I don't need more red cards that do a lot of damage. You know, if it was like a really strong card and did something more unique, then I would be more interested in it. But I don't really have a good answer to your question of how does one go about choosing a power level target. I feel like if you're a cube designer and you're thinking about the power level, that's basically the best thing that you can do. Like, you can make choices about what cards to include in your cube. You can choose to aim for a specific power level. And you can be wrong sometimes. Like, I refused to add some cards for a while, and the people who played my cube eventually convinced me to do it. And, like, often I'm wrong. And it's important to be open to being wrong. But having an opinion can help you build a best cube, I think.
Yeah. Well, Ben, I have to ask, in Mono Red, how do you manage enchantments?
Yeah, I haven't really found it to be a problem, to be totally honest. It is true that enchantments are extremely hard to remove in Monored Cube, but they're also just, like, not very strong, so it doesn't really matter. Like, I like including build-around enchantments in my cube because I think it lets you do something fun and weird. So, like, Mana Flare, Goblin Bombardment. Repercussion is actually one of my favorites. I love building a Repercussion Star of Extinction deck. It's nice.
Oh yeah, that was one of the first things I learned in Commander was Repercussion and a Chain Reaction. Yeah, it's like that. Those experiences are foundational.
Yeah, it's almost like trying to build a creatureless control deck, basically, and your win condition is just Repercussion. But yeah, like, I have a few ways of killing enchantments almost by accident. Like, Chaos Warp is in my cube. That one is really funny, actually, because every time I draft with, like, other members of Play Design, no one touches Chaos Warp. And every time I draft with, people whose primary way of interacting with Magic is Commander, they, like, love drafting Chaos Warp. It's just very funny to me to see that distinction. But the enchantments are just, like, not that strong, so it doesn't bother me that there's no way to remove them.
I wonder if this is revealing kind of a measure of bias that even designers come to with something like this, where even for me doing some research on a project like this and looking through, it's so tempting to go, well, these are things I expect of Red, that they would be challenging. And then to hear you say, nah, not really an issue. Like, it's kind of enlightening of like, I should check my assumptions at the door and try it and see what happens.
Yeah, it's just, you can always just kill your opponent. If you
player removal is enchantment removal, right?
Yeah, if you're sick of losing to weapons manufacturing or whatever, you can always just try to attack.
Just be faster. Yeah. That's really good. So Ben, how do you go about making changes to a cube like this? You get new red cards in every set. What do you do from there?
It's an interesting question. I guess I normally just look through the spoilers of the most recent set. Now, you would assume that I would know all of the cards that are coming out because I work for Wizards of the Coast, but I often forget because, we work 2 years in the future or whatever, so whatever I'm working on, it's been like a year and a half since I've seen these cards, and sometimes I just forget what they are.
Yeah, I imagine the versions had different names and the playtest slips, and yeah.
Yeah. But usually I will look through the spoiler and just try to identify cards that I think would fit into existing archetypes, or cards that I think would be a cool, fun, like, build around that are not in existing archetypes. Those are a lot more rare. But usually that at any given time on my mind, there's like, I'd love to buff this archetype a little bit because I think it's a little weak, or I have an archetype that I think is oversupported and could lose some cards. Or there's some cards that haven't been playing that well or haven't been that fun in the last few drafts we've done, so they're on the chopping block. But I look through the spoiler for cards that I would be excited to include in my cube, and then I write them down, and then I compare that to my list of cards that I want to take out of my cube, and inevitably I want to add more cards than I want to take out, so that I spend tons more time agonizing over the decisions and trying to figure out things that I'm happy to cut. It's a very difficult process, but I also really like it, so because I like making updates to my cube. I think playing with new cards is fun. And Lorwyn had a bunch of cards for me, actually. You might be able to guess that would happen since goblins are a major theme.
Yeah. Well, and even some of those things that I imagine will become staples in the coming years, things like Seer jump to the front of mind, just like a clean, efficient burn spell that has a different number than we're used to seeing. Like, those are important changes.
Yeah, I actually, before I committed to adding it, I looked through my current list and I was like, okay, do I have any instant speed, 4 damage, 2 mana card? Like, I was just trying to make sure that it was doing something unique. And it is a 2-mana instant 4 damage, and that is like a fairly unique thing in my cube.
You've chosen to avoid hybrid and Phyrexian mana to kind of cheat the color pie there a little bit. Was that an intentional decision from the start, or was that something that you worked your way into?
It's an intentional decision. It's like just a personal philosophy. I don't mind color pie breaks. Like, I have color pie breaks in my Monored Cube, like Sting Scourger or whatever. But I just want, when people open the packs, I want it to just feel very red, and I want it to look very red. So I bounce off cards that have frames of other colors, or like cards that have mana symbols of other colors. It feels like it pushes up against the spirit of being a Monored Cube, even if not like the letter of the law or whatever. So I just have no intention of putting Phyrexian mana cards in. I might change my mind about hybrid cards at some point. I don't know. I'm leaving that door open. But like I said, there's so many cards I want to put in the cube already that I haven't really felt compelled to try to include hybrid cards. But Murderous Redcap, look, if I decide to break the seal, it's going to be for Murderous Redcap. I love that card.
Front of the line.
One of my favorite cards ever.
Was that something you ever played in tournaments?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a very strong card. You don't even need to like do combo nonsense with it. It's just kind of a strong card in a regular game of Magic.
Yeah. It's like, I think of it in that Flame Tongue Kavu realm of like, it's just a thing that enters and deals damage, and it doesn't have to be fancy sometimes. It just does what it needs to do.
And it's a goblin.
Yes. Very important.
And this is a personal thing, but I love putting silly combos in my cubes. So like, I have Lesser Masticore in my Monored Cube specifically so that there can be a persist combo card. So like Metallic Mimic, Lesser Masticore, and a Sack Outlet will give you infinite somethings. And actually I was so proud of my friend who found a Krark Clan Ironworks infinite with Lesser Masticore that was extremely convoluted.
Nice.
And I was like, okay, well now I'm never cutting this from the cube because this is awesome.
Well, I feel like if you put KCI in your cube, you are inviting players for that to that kind of exploration.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it involved using Underworld Cookbook to get back the Lesser Masticore. It was insane.
Like, that's one of those, as I've talked to other people as well, like those sorts of things that are so encouraging when your players discover things that you never intended. Or perhaps that you intended in a different way, but that they're the ones that are bringing it to the surface for you.
Yeah, it's a super fun experience to see players find that stuff organically.
Do you have particular experiences from working on this project that you would expect to take into your other design projects, like either your other cubes or things that you do for work?
I mean, I think it's all one hodgepodge. I feel like I learn from every Magic design thing I do, and that bleeds into the other Magic design things I do, so it's hard to pick. Like, I've taken the structure of how we build limited sets, and then I applied that to try to build this Monored Cube in the first place with the, 10 archetypes thing, and that's grown significantly more fuzzy over time, but it was a really good starting point. To go back the other way, I guess I would say that, to call back to the combo thing we were just talking about, I really enjoy when there are really cool, bespoke 2-card interactions. It comes up a lot in Cube, and I think I also think that's just really fun to come up in limited formats that we build for Magic sets. Whenever there are 2 cards that combo together in a really pleasing way, even when they're in different colors and it only comes up once in a blue moon, I think that experience is really cool. In Edge of Eternities, there was an infinite combo with 2 Peregrine Beckoners and a Sack Outlet. And I thought that was super cool. I didn't do that. I didn't put that in or whatever. That was someone else on the Magic design team. But I think that sort of experience is super cool. And I've started trying to intentionally put stuff like that into sets that I work on. And I feel like I picked that up from Cube.
Is that the sort of thing that you would tell players or drop little breadcrumbs? Or is it here are the pieces in the sandbox, do with them what you will?
It's the kind of thing that if you just put it in the format, someone will do it eventually because of the scale, because of how many games of our limited formats get played. Eventually someone will do it and then take a picture of it and post it on a social media platform or whatever and be like, oh, look at this really cool thing I did. And I think it's awesome when we put really cool things to do in the limited formats. So I don't think we have to even leave breadcrumbs. People will just do, like, it'll just come up eventually.
Yeah.
I think for Cube, you probably have to, for Cube, you don't play as much on the scale as, Magic Arena provides for limited formats. So I feel like you have to try a lot harder.
I mean, if you get to play at that scale, give me a call. I want to come see your Cube group.
Yeah, I mean, we play like twice a month or something like that, but it's
pretty
not
good.
Yeah.
Are there specific elements of Monored Cube you want to make sure that we cover?
Yeah, I guess I just want to emphasize that, like, it's really cool to start with restrictions and then see all of the different decks and all of the different styles of games that can come out the other end, even when you place a bunch of restrictions on yourself. And that's what really appealed to me about the Monored Cube and about other color-restricted cubes. I think restricted cubes are really cool in that you get to see a very different expression of what Magic is, even though the core rules of Magic are still all the same. And I think the games are all a little bit different than how games of normal Magic go, and like adjusting your expectations and adjusting like what you think is strong to account for the new context is super fun. And that's what I really love about the Monored Cube. Like saying Radiant Fountain is stronger than Ancient Tomb. You would never say that. You would never ever say that in a normal game of Magic, but maybe it's true in Monored Cube. Who knows?
Well, I love that kind of setup can squeeze you up against the walls of what the color is able to do, or like what your environment can do. And yeah, it puts you into those zones where the unusual thing could be the best thing.
Yeah, the whole context changing and having to reevaluate what cards you think might be strong is one of the things that really appeals to me.
So it sounds like you would encourage people to try a monocolored cube sometime.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think they're really fun. I mean, again, I think red and blue are the most fun, but I think that when built correctly, they can be super fun to play hundreds of drafts of. I don't think that it's a boring experience at all, and I think they're really cool.
I'm right there with you. Well, Ben, I like to ask, as we are kind of thinking back through our chat here, what advice would you want to make sure to share with other designers as they're thinking about their own projects?
I think you should be intentional. Just be aware of what the experience you're trying to create is and what cards are going to help you lead to that experience. And just be aware of different archetypes of cards, not like deck archetypes, but like removal or cheap creature or expensive creature. Like, those are different classes of cards, and just being aware of how strong each of those classes of cards are in your cube and like how happy you are with each of them being super strong, I think is the easiest way to sculpt an environment overall. I find most of the fun in doing the sculpting of the environment and trying to get people to have a good time. So that's the part that I find the most important.
No, that's good. I like it. Well, in lieu of my normal wrap-up question here, you had something that you posted on which bio of yours that I was reading, and I loved the question there. So I'm going to pose it to you as our wrap-up here. Are you supposed to bolt the player or the creature?
Oh yeah, that's one of the best questions, for that is the fundamental question of Magic in my mind, and one of the reasons why I find Magic so fascinating is just, you have Lightning Strike in your hand and your opponent has a 2/2 and you have a 2/2. Are you supposed to Lightning Strike their 2/2 or not? And that's the kind of energy that I try to bring to Monored Cube, and the reason why the question is so good is that it doesn't have a consistent answer. Sometimes you need to save your Lightning Strike, and sometimes you need to Lightning Strike their 2/2. And just figuring out what the correct thing to do is in this exact situation is just why I love playing Magic.
So you kind of have to leave it as like the spinning top at the end of Inception, right?
It depends on what your hand is. It depends on what their hand is. It depends on what their deck is. It depends on so many things. You'll never get the correct answer because there's no correct answer.
I love it. Well, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to explore some of this with us. I know there's always so much we could dive into, but this has been really enlightening and encouraging to me to think more about red and to think more about how you're approaching monocolored cubes and what I can do with it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
If folks want to follow up with you, maybe read more about the Monored Cube or see some more of what you're doing, where would be the best place for us to point them?
Yeah, I have a Twitter handle, BSWeitz, so that's BSWEITZ 123. I'm also on Blue Sky, And on Cube Cobra, I think my handle is BS Weitz, BSWEITZ. Yeah, it is. So you can see my cubes there too. I have a combo cube as well, which is, like I said, I just enjoy combos and stuff, but this one is like, okay, you're trying to combo off either with like a creature combo or like the stack or whatever, and how do we make that experience fun? So that's also a cool one.
Yeah, after hearing you describe a Lesser Masticore with that much excitement, I am not surprised at all to hear that there's a combo cube in the works. No, that's fantastic. Well, Ben, again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate what you've done with this cube and for sharing it with us here. Looking forward to hopefully opportunities to shuffle up and play it one of these days and more opportunities to connect in the future.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for having me on.